Hi, you guys. Am I live? Okay. Um, it is time for episode 3 of reading the Oat Project, my first book, out loud here as though I were sitting next to your bed and you were sick and I had to read to you. And you would probably be like, stop, it's making me cry. It's too sad, or something like that. If you're joining me for the first time, there are 2 other recordings last night and the night before. I am reading them in order. The first 2 are both around an hour, maybe a little longer. And tonight I'm going to try something new. This is a grand experiment, so just know that I'm doing my best. And thank you, Heidi. But I'm doing my best and just trying to figure out how to best share this, record this, all of those questions. So tonight I'm going to stop at about half an hour and then I'm going to go live again. So I will finish the chapter, but I'm going to stop about half an hour in so that if somebody wants to listen to this later, they don't necessarily have to like sit down for an hour, if you get my drift. If you guys just hate this and think it's a horrible idea, feel free to let me know. But I'm just trying to get this done in the best way. I'm looking at my screen, and this picture drives me crazy because it can't be crooked. So it looks okay. All right. So there are 2 other videos. They're both on my YouTube page. They are also on my Facebook page. They are also on my new YouTube channel. There are links in the event page, and I will put links in the comments of this. I'm uploading each video after we get off here every night, and eventually there will be a playlist. Apparently, I cannot make playlists unless I have 100 subscribers. And the YouTube channel is a new one. And so if you want to subscribe, that'd be great. There will be more content besides just the book eventually. But this is a new endeavor. It's really kind of gooey and fluid. I have plans, that extend from right now to TED Talks to Oprah. But I'm just starting with where I am and doing what I know I want to do, which is read to you. So the book we're reading is The Oat Project, How I Faced My Fear and Came of Age in One Wild Summer. It is a memoir. It is all true. There are parts that are parentheses in the book that are kind of from 2016, which is when I finished the book. So they're almost present day. And then there is a lot of inner thought. And in the book, that's indicated with italics. So if you hear me kind of change tense to myself, that's what you're hearing in the middle of experiencing what I did. I recorded my thoughts as well. And I think that's it. So, oh yeah, the first reading that you'll find is the prologue that talked about how it all started. And then the second one is when I smoked marijuana for the first time, which was the first thing that I did. And then, and the book is available on Amazon as an ebook, a paperback, and a hardcover. So there's that. Are you happy, my marketing friends? So I will try to get the book in the picture for you. And okay. Chapter 2, Sucking the Stick of Death. Just want to kind of take a look at what time it is. Okay. Boxing, cussing, and snuff. You know how most families have a black sheep? For the life of me, I can't think of one living bad example in ours. My parents never said anything like, "Careful, or you'll end up like your crazy cousin so-and-so." We usually lived far away, so I didn't know any well enough to see or imitate wild flaws. My uncle was my only wild and secular relative. He drank, danced, and smoked, the triumvirate of sins in our denomination. He was an anesthesiologist, so despite his being a heathen according to our standards, my parents would have been pleased as punch for any of us to be so successful. I'm going to pause for just a second. Can you guys hear me all right? I'm using a little bit of a different sound setup. Could somebody just chime in with yes or no? I see you people. Hi. Wow. Hi, George. So somebody holler out if you can't see me, if you can't hear me well enough, okay? All right. I'll read that sentence again. He was an anesthesiologist, so despite his being a heathen, according to our standards, my parents would have been pleased as punch for any of us to be so successful. Among those no longer with us, however, my great-grandmother sparkled from the void. When my mother told stories, her eyes twinkled, like I imagined Granny's had. Her name was Annie Itzen. She stood no taller than 4'10" and had long, thick black hair when she married my grandfather. She was an outsider and far lower on the social ladder. His family never accepted her and shunned them after the wedding. When he became disabled and couldn't work, Granny supported him and all the children on her own. She was a hard worker. I thought of how hard my mother worked. And she had a big heart and deep faith. People would call her to pray over them for healing when they got sick. I thought of my mother's heart, her rare, deep ability to forgive, keeping an open mind. My mom said she attended the Black Pentecostal church across the road from their house, going right down to the altar with everybody else, speaking in tongues and getting filled with the Holy Spirit every Sunday. I marveled at that. In my world, Pentecostals, no matter their color, had been described as out of control and over the top with their wild style of holiness. Many times in my life, I have described Nazarenes as, quote, holiness-based, but not charismatic like Pentecostals. One day, my mother continued, Granny's beautiful hair got in her way one too many times as she washed the clothes. In tubs, no washing machines. She said, bring me a bowl and the shears. She put the bowl over her head and chopped all that hair off at her chin, with straight, blunt bangs across her forehead. She wore it like that the rest of her life. My mother went on, telling the best and most confusing part of the story. Granny loved boxing. I thought, boxing? I wondered which boxers were of her era. Joe somebody? She would sit on a stool only a couple feet away from the black and white television and watch bouts for hours. She'd be throwing punches right along with them, cussing out the boxers and referees, lambasting them all, she said, grinning, sometimes laughing. Cussing snagged me. My mother smiled about how my great-grandmother used to cuss. I wasn't allowed to say crap, let alone anything harsher like gee or gosh, based on Jesus and God, thus taking the name of the Lord in vain. It was wrong and weak-minded, but the delight in my mom's face was real and infectious. Was my mom a rebel? She went on. So she'd be cussing and yelling and, she paused for effect, dipping snuff, her spit tin right next to her. Snuff, I thought, isn't that tobacco? Tobacco ruined homes, bankrupted poor people, kept them from buying good food for their children, caused cancer. My brothers and I weren't even allowed to accept chewing tobacco-looking gum or candy cigarettes on Halloween. I remember wondering if they tasted like the chalk they resembled, if the paper around them felt like it sounded, crackling. Tobacco in all forms, even fake, was forbidden. To Nazarenes, the body is the temple of God, the vessel of the Holy Spirit, to be filled once, fully, in sanctification, then refilled every morning through devotions and prayer. A smoker placed a barrier between themselves and God with every cigarette. They could attend church, but couldn't be a member, as this destructive habit made daily sanctification impossible. Parentheses. The hypocrisy of this in the face of many of these same people being addicted to food or other vices still astounds me. They might be saved, thus heaven-bound, but they lived on an existential edge. If they died while smoking without asking God's forgiveness, where would they go? I hadn't attended church regularly for 7 years, had friends who smoked, and disagreed with my former church on smoking's being sin. Despite all this, I disdained the habit. I wonder what my Granny Annie Itzen would have thought. I wish I had known her. I wished for half her spunk, as I found myself nervous at the thought of smoking a cigarette. Not with me, then against me. It was already June. I had not planned on starting the project in May, let alone smoking marijuana first, so I spent the rest of the month finishing up the kids' school year and scheduling tasks. My world felt shifted to surreal, having left the right path by doing drugs. The Christian friend I walked with several mornings a week had expressed cautious support. She said she didn't really understand why I wanted to do these things, but she treasured our friendship. I responded that I didn't want to do them for their intrinsic value or lack thereof, but to know what they felt like. She advised me to have extra prayer coverage and support, and I agreed with her. She was always sweet, but in the weeks between the first and second tasks, as fallout with other friends became deeper, our easy conversation was overshadowed by the presence of what was now my work. She wanted to talk more about it, but my confidence that it couldn't change me seemed to make her reticent. Parentheses. I mourn our friendship, as well as the others I lost. Sorry, I have to say that again. It's hard. It's weird how hard this is. So parentheses means, again, if you're joining late, that I wrote this in 2016, not in 2007. I mourn our friendship, as well as the others I lost. They had no idea of the depths of my naivete, no clue of what I had been through and was experiencing even then. How could they have known when I wasn't even aware of the full reasons for my actions? I hesitated to ask them to join me, afraid of more disagreement, which fed the strain. Now, I know I could have handled it better. I could have been braver, been more optimistic in them as friends and people. But I wasn't at the point where it even occurred to me. I thought they were against me because they didn't fully agree with me. Totally fine. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I love you too, Suzanne. When I asked the Oat Council to choose something, hang on. I love you, Suzanne, and thank you. I can't dwell on that because it's going to make me cry more. Okay. Are you saying what I think you're saying? When I asked the Oat Council to choose something from the list to do with me, no one chose smoking, so I had to find help. Parentheses. I discovered later that a few lit up socially. Wooglin's Deli is in a tiny strip of shops on North Tejon Avenue across from the Colorado College campus. Their quiche and carrot cake are renowned, and locals and students happily mingle in the coffee shop vibe. Though we moved east when we bought a house, our first place after marriage had been 3 blocks from Woodlands. I had seen staff come and go, befriended those who stayed, known them through having 3 kids and going back to school. I usually parked out back and often came and went through the kitchen door. Isidore had fair skin, dark hair with blunt bangs, and a heart-shaped face that turned heads as she worked the deli counter. Parentheses. She's a nurse now, and I can only imagine how happy her patients must be to see her. She seemed infinitely cooler than me, so I was surprised when she said, "I'll teach you to smoke a cigarette, Janae." We agreed to meet there the following week. I would never have predicted that the first 2 things I would be doing for this would be smoking marijuana and then a cigarette. The worst first? I had held and taken 1 puff of a clove cigarette from a girl in the group at the bar at the writers' conference in April. After hearing smoking was on the list, she insisted I follow her outside, insisted I take 1 puff while everyone inside was still debating my character, goals, and sanity. It smelled nice, but tasted awful. I coughed up a lung. Woodlands Deli, one of my homes away from home. I'm going to reread that. Woodlands Deli, one of my homes away from home. I moved to Colorado Springs in the fall of 1996. Between 96 and 98, I lived with my family, first on the southeast side, then northeast in the Black Forest. In the first, my mother, father, brother, and sister-in-law lived in the top floor's 2 bedrooms. I shared the basement with my youngest brother. Unemployed, we spent hours watching the Comedy Channel. Later, we moved 10 miles north to 5 acres and a bigger house at 7,500 altitude. We called it the Jackson Commune. In November 1997, I had an editing job and debated getting an apartment. Jack, wow, I forgot that this part was in this chapter. I'm going to take a drink. Not a drink. I suck at drinking. You guys think I'm wild, but I suck at drink. Like, I'm still, it's just not, yeah. Okay. It's water. I know you wish it were whiskey, but okay. In November 1997, I had an editing job and debated getting an apartment. Jack, then my boyfriend, was visiting from Florida. We had dated for 6 months in Florida until 1996. I wanted to work in publishing in the, quote, big city of Colorado Springs. Jack helped me move and stayed for a month, deciding he liked it here enough to follow me. A few months later, he did, and shared the Black Forest house with us for 6 months. Then he moved back to Florida to build his brother's house. In the middle of its construction, he came to see me. We were at our favorite Vietnamese restaurant, and I said I had started looking at apartments downtown. "So you're getting an apartment?" he asked. "Yeah, I think so," I said. "You know how I was planning on moving back here after I finished my brother's house?" he asked. "Yeah, you told me," I said, drenching my noodles in yummy fish sauce. "Well, it seems kind of silly for me to get an apartment, and for you to have one too," he said. "Wasteful." "Wasteful?" I asked. I was slow. "Yeah, for us to get 2 apartments." I stopped chewing. My brow contracted. "Okay," I said, but my heart pounded as I wondered, almost panicking, if I should say out loud the words in my head. "So, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "What do you mean?" he asked. Parentheses, I recall feeling slightly exasperated. "I mean, you're saying we should share?" I asked. Notice I couldn't just say it. "Well, yeah," he said. "Are you asking me what it sounds like you're asking me?" I asked. "For real?" "I guess so," he said. "Yes." My courage grew. "You're asking me to marry you?" "Yes. Yes, I am." I couldn't breathe properly, and my heart raced, eyes about to cry. Okay, I said. I recall hugging, kissing, and laughing. When? Well, when were you planning on getting the apartment? He asked. February or March, I said. When will you be done with your brother's house? By then. You want to get married in 4 months in Florida. I had promised all of my friends there that if we got married, it would be at the 4,000 member church where I had taught a large Sunday school class, sung in the choir, and on the worship team, and founded a drama ministry. Sure. Okay then. I took a big breath as we laughed and started planning. Parentheses. 4 months later, after tremendous help from Jack's family and my friends, we pulled off a large wedding in Florida, moved him to Colorado into my apartment in downtown Colorado Springs, 3 blocks from Wooglan's Deli. I've since wondered if he was truly asking me to marry him, or if he had simply wanted to live together for a while. I assumed marriage. I was still a virgin, you see, at 28 years old. Jack and I kissed and touched intensely, but no sex, intercourse, nor oral. Perhaps this worked because he was in Florida for one of the 2 years we dated. I was as passionate as I am now, but there was no question in my mind that I would remain a virgin until married. How would things have been different if we'd lived together, if we'd had sex? Would I have been aware enough to discern the problems that eventually ended our marriage? Would those problems have even surfaced? Would we have gotten married at all? I know such hypotheticals are pointless. It was what it was. My cluelessness, unavoidable. The longest relationship I had before Jack was for a month and a half, and marriage was assumed. It simply would be. I recently found a journal entry from weeks before the wedding. Quote, I miss Jack. I do. I know I do. But I just feel frozen inside. Journal. 2 days before smoking a cigarette. Okay, I am crazy. What the hell am I doing? Voices from my past infect my bravado and logic. Tobacco and the need to be cool are of the devil. All that food money wasted on cigarettes and lottery tickets by all those people who really can't afford it, depriving children from food and shelter. All those lungs disintegrating into black death, to be chained to a substance, to jeopardize my relationship with God through bondage to something of this earth. Do I still believe this? Fear rises. And I'm going to pause and just kind of tell you a little bit about that other part about Jack. It's weird because we're good friends. Like, we co-parented our kids through the last 12 years, and he's a great guy. And it's really a strange feeling to look back and know how really clueless I was. And, it's just, it's life, right? We all do our thing, but he's a great guy, and we've managed to stay friends. That's a little bit of the end of the book, but not really. But it's really throughout this book, I'm talking about how my marriage was in 2007, while I was married, and it's just an odd feeling. So if I cry or have a weird look on my face, that's probably why. Okay? That's an awkward fist bump. Yeah, okay. Report. The death stick. Hang on. Okay. I'm going to read. Okay. Nobody responded when I said I was going to stop at half an hour and then restart immediately. Are you cool? Are you guys cool? This is a pretty long chapter. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I'm going to read for about 5 or 6 more minutes, and then I'll stop and restart so that I can make it shorter on Facebook videos. Excuse me. So that people don't have to listen to the whole hour or so. So if you all hate that, then just comment and be like, no, don't, whatever. Okay, I'm going to do my best. So report the death stick. The day of smoking was a normal one. Taking the oldest 2 children to school, cleaning, nursing Leo. Underneath it all ran panic. I am ruining my life. I'm about to make this all real, about to actively make vice my job. Smoking marijuana had been headlong craziness. I had committed to trying it with one of my best friends, so I had to follow through. Smoking a cigarette seemed scarier. Though I had told everyone about my plans and acted all fine with it, I was petrified. And beyond that, on this day, I realized I was more afraid of who I was becoming than of the project. I was in charge of myself, of this, and I was the one who would feel the consequences. It was still the beginning. I could call it off and be only embarrassed. People would forgive and forget. In J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, Bilbo is in the tunnel of Smaug the dragon's mountain lair, alone in the dark, listening to the sleeping, gurgling horror he's about to face. He hesitates and considers turning around back to safety. Instead, he goes on. Tolkien says that though he accomplished greater deeds later, he was at his most courageous in that moment. It gets me. It's weird. It's like reading somebody else's words sometimes. Alone with my children, moving in the rhythm of everyday life, subconsciously debating whether I should continue the project, that day was my Bilbo in the tunnel moment. I was meeting Isidore at Wooglan's around dinner time for her smoke break. At 6:30, I was still home, post-shower, and dawdling. Jack looked at me every now and then, clearly wondering why I hadn't left yet, but wisely not asking. I played with the children until I felt like I was putting Isidore out by not checking in. I called her and said that I was late. She sounded so matter-of-fact. It helped me over my fears. So, finally, at 6:45, I left. 7 minutes later, I drove by Wooglan's instead of parking. I do not want to be here. I feel like crap, exhausted, don't want to smoke. What if I have an asthma attack? I hadn't had one in years. What if I'm that one in however many who is instantly addicted? Could it really happen? Shoulders up by my ears. Breathe, Janae. Expect nothing. Be calm. Try. I disdained myself. Why did I want to do this task in particular, or even the whole project? I kept asking myself if I was indeed trying to be like everyone else, like some had accused. For most of my life, I had thought of people who smoke as weak. But strong people have potent addictions. And what is weak anyway? What is strong? Maybe I avoided it because I was never close to cool. Perhaps our family's affinity with holiness-based Christianity comes from genetic hypersensitivity. We make the general in the movie Dr. Strangelove look sane. He was right about fluoride, but that's not pertinent, is it now? When I go to sleep, I can feel my body cross to unconsciousness, effervescing, head to toe. Clothes, seams, tags, and fabric cannot itch or chafe. I need less than the usual dose of medication. Research has shown that hypochondriacs live longer than average, seeming pessimistic but more in tune with their bodies, thus noticing problems sooner. A few weeks before, Percy, my middle son, said, Mama, when I raise my right arm, I can feel the blood in my left foot. Stonewall Jackson, my great-great-uncle, according to family legend, was said to think one side of his body heavier than the other, holding up an arm to balance it, before his left arm was shot off by friendly fire. No matter the reason, the thought of polluting my body with a substance that definitely leads to premature death was unthinkable. I don't want to smoke. I circled the block twice before deciding to park, and then couldn't find a space. Maybe it's a sign that I'm not supposed to do this. The third time around, a space right in front of the door opened up. Drat. Deep breath. I sat in the car for a minute, then went in. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. I had one response of keep going. So, okay. It seemed proper to drink coffee while smoking a cigarette. And I have to take another drink before I start in on that part. Okay. It seemed proper to drink coffee while smoking a cigarette. Though maybe half and half and sugar negates the cool. I sat at the bar, chatting with everyone, my quiche cooling and salad wilting while my heart raced and leg bounced. Around 8, Isidore was finally ready for a break. My nerves and nerve jittered. We headed out the kitchen door to the back of the building. I had seen so many friends and acquaintances smoking here over the years. Going behind the building myself to smoke felt like breaking the social barrier, however friendly, of employee-customer. Janae's going to smoke her first cigarette with me, Isidore announced to the kitchen guys as we passed through, her eyes glittering, eyebrows arched. What? Tall guy said. He followed us. What do you mean? Janae has never smoked a cigarette before, and she's going to try it right now. Tall guy looked delighted. You've never tried a cigarette? Ever? He asked. Oh, good grief. I'm the spectacle I did not want to be. No, I haven't, I said. Bald guy followed us too and said, don't do it. What? I asked. He looked like the toughest guy in the kitchen. Brawny, bald, tattooed. Don't do it. Smoking kills you, he said. Yes, I know, I said, but I'm smoking just this one to see what it's like. She's doing it for a book, numbskull, Isidore said. You're going to get addicted. I can't believe I'm running into that here. It's like my church is here with us. She's smoking one cigarette, Isidore said, not a pack. But could it happen? I was taught some sins are instantly addictive. One drink, one puff, one hit. Excuse me. And I'd have to drink, puff, and hit every day for the rest of my life. Willpower vanished, Satan leaping into my soul through the door I opened for him. Bald guy's warnings set my fear of smoking clanging. He warned me again before going inside. Don't do it. Tall guy grinned, leaning against the building. Oh man, I have an audience. Okay, Janae, Isidore said, pulling 2 cigarettes out of a pack and handing me one. This is what you do. As she demonstrated, I held mine in the palm of my shaking hand. What the hell am I doing? I tried to memorize her motions as she quickly had it lit and in her mouth. Your turn, Isidore said. Which end goes in my mouth? I asked. Did I really just ask that? Her eye roll could be seen across town. The end with the filter, Janae. See? Ah, yes, I said, because I really did. The filter end had a stripe. She handed me her lighter. I clicked it and held it to the proper end. Why won't it light? I asked, with it in my mouth. I talked out of the corner of my mouth like all those people in movies. You have to suck harder to get the oxygen all the way inside, Isidore said. Am I going to waste her cigarette? I tried again and succeeded. A perfect cherry, the lit end of red ash formed on my very first cigarettes. I sucked, holding it in my mouth, then blew out smoke. Not bad. No coughing. Janae, you didn't inhale, Isidore said. Oh, I said, crud. I tried again and coughed, but not as much as I expected. It wasn't as intense as marijuana smoke. As I exhaled, Bald Guy came back out and said, "You shouldn't do that. It will kill you." "I'm only doing it this once," I said, catching some of Isidore's moxie. He laughed. "Relax, Janae. This isn't going to kill you." But the tension in my shoulders drained down into my fingers, locked around the cigarette. I'm surprised it didn't pop out. It reminded me of the first time I used my middle finger to flip someone off. I was in Christian college, and after lunch one day, my little brother yelled something snarky, and just to shock him, I shot the bird across the empty cafeteria. He couldn't believe it, but I think I went up a little in his book. After that, I got brave and wanted to attempt the, quote, secret bird, flipping off our Spanish professor like my friend often did. She'd scratch the side of her face during class with her middle finger, a sneaky "fuck you." I tried to do the same, practicing with her in the girls-only dorm. She said mine was too stiff, too much a naked bird, middle finger fully extended, with no clothing of fingers on either side, and I'd get caught. I have a policy about it now. I only flip off those I love, often making it into a double flip-off dance, fingers swerving around my hips and body. But right then, behind the building with Isidore, I was holding the cigarette as stiffly as that naked bird. She grabbed my hand and said, "Relax, Janae." I got better at it. I even squatted down like little Chinese women I had seen in photos, arms around knees, cigarette in one hand. Cool. Still nervous. I started to feel a prickling in my head by the fourth drag. I wasn't coughing anymore. "So, were you instantly addicted?" I asked, afraid of her answer. "Oh no, Janae. It takes much more than once, honey." She took another drag. So did I. "I started smoking in high school to be cool." She smiled. "It took me a couple of months to really get hooked. Then, when I started working, one advantage of being a smoker is you get designated breaks. 3 minutes, completely to yourself, no demands. And while the nicotine helped to handle the job, those breaks did as much as the actual smoking." I nodded, recalling the 4 years I'd waited tables, envying those smoke breaks. During my many tables at a time induced panic attacks, I hid in the bathroom, crying, waiting for sublingual vitamin B to help. Smoking wasn't even an option. I grew up around Prevention Magazine, not Marlboros. "I think waiting tables should be required for all Americans, like Army service is in Israel," I said. "Yeah?" Isidore asked, laughing. "Yeah, I mean, the service industry is as important to our nation's economy as any army, right?" I said. "That is true, yes," she said, laughing while shaking her head. As I held that stick of death, letting it hang in my lips, felt smoke inside my mouth, unlike food or liquid, I understood the tactile lure of smoking. It was like the lightest, sweetest French kiss around the roof of my mouth. I wondered if the concentration it took to handle a cigarette's size and shape while talking and sucking the smoke and knocking off the ash might grow my brain. The ritual reminded me of the man in Jacques Tati's movie Playtime, who waits outside an office for his appointment, rhythmically brushing dirt off the tops of his shoes, dusting off his seat, slapping his gloves, clicking his pen. I could imagine myself performing the ritual of lighting and dragging to music or a beat in my head. And this sequence is the same everywhere. Does the CIA require their agents to smoke? Mutual addiction, or the appearance of it, must be a powerful wall breaker. The ember end neared the white line of the filter. This must be This must be the longest cigarette break Isidore's ever taken. Do you want to try a French inhale? She asked. Yes, definitely, I said. Ooh la la, French. Suck in. Uh, Suck in, then inhale through your nose, letting the smoke float out of your mouth instead of blowing it out, she said. I tried. Perfect, Janae, Isidore said. You did it the first time. In the space under my skull, my brain fizzed like French champagne. I took the last drag and put it out on the pavement. I looked at it. I can't leave it on the ground. Littering is wrong. I got up and put it in the dumpster. Isidore laughed. If Jesus came back to Earth now, he'd be a trash collector, I said. What? Isidore asked. I think Jesus would be poking papers with a stick thingy, cleaning up vomit all day, I said. Seeing the underbelly, the reality of our lives. He'd know homeless people and the best places for dumpster diving. Janae, you are just too much, Isidore said, shaking her head again. My head was light and floaty. We walked back through the kitchen, and Bald Guy said, You're addicted now. I rolled my eyes. Some people are more susceptible to addiction, yes, but the church judges certain substances as evil, ignoring extensive proof of how food alters brain chemistry as deeply and consistently. To me, smoking a cigarette was morally no worse than eating white bread and white sugar. I really thought that. Oh, wow. Okay. I sat at the counter and tried to eat my now cold quiche, but wasn't hungry. Nerves or nicotine? I was dizzy, but not like marijuana. My arms tingled. I can feel my legs. My mouth felt gummy, like after eating spinach. Do I smell like smoke? Am I addicted? Do I smell like smoke? Am I addicted? I rolled my eyes at myself. Of course not. Good grief. I felt silly as Tall Guy and everyone else smiled affectionately at me. Will, a local woodworking friend and Zen master, sat down next to me. We discussed smoking, the meaning of murder, and Zen. I had always been a bit disdainful of the principle of detachment, but Will seemed fully engaged with life. Is being detached useful for viscerally sensitive people like me? When I was high, I really don't like saying those words, I was able to pick up only one train of thought. But now my brain was so clear. It wasn't like coffee, but I could see how coffee would mesh with this supercharge. I sipped my cold, creamed up coffee and tried to relax. It really should be black coffee. Excuse me. Wooglands was closing, so I went down the street to Rico's to write down what had just happened. My son's preschool teacher was there, and as we hugged, I worried she'd think less of me if I reeked of smoke. She said, no, she couldn't smell anything, laughing. Phew. The only empty table was up against the stage where a guitarist played and sang. I ignored him to write, but he kept making sly remarks when he turned his head away from the mic. He called for requests, and I asked for an Al Green song. He did justice to Let's Stay Together. I finished writing just as his girlfriend showed up. We all talked like old friends until after closing. Though I had begun to be more cautious about telling people about the project, these two were simply delighted. They didn't express concern. Some friends have been all for it, while others worried it would change me. I kept insisting it wouldn't, though I wanted to say, of course it will change me, but is that all bad? We all change, don't we? Excuse me. I got home around 11:30, checked email, surfed the internet, washed my contacts and face, got in bed, nursed Leo, and went to sleep. I had begun weaning him, cutting the midnight feeding first. I couldn't get a tattoo if he was still nursing. Something about the ink getting into breast milk. And I had to plan for that last wild oat. I wasn't ready to wean him. Wanted to nurse him longer than I had the others. felt he needed it. But my milk seemed thinner than with his brother. Nursing him had been different from the very beginning. Catalyst. Leo's had been an uneventful pregnancy, except for almost getting gestational diabetes. I will always wonder if the drugs pumped into me during a, quote, necessary root canal negatively affected his development. I was right on schedule at 40 weeks as my belly started contracting one afternoon. The contractions were increasing at a good pace, so we called our midwife. I was excited to finally have my baby at home. The midwife arrived and checked my progress. I was at 5 centimeters, halfway there with lots of work ahead. She began preparing. About 30 minutes later, 2 monster contractions folded me in half, each peaking for a full 3 minutes. I stood hanging onto a dresser at the foot of our bed. I panted to her and Jack. Those were intense. They helped me into the birthing pool. I wasn't planning on delivering in the pool, but needed to rest for several more hours of labor. The midwife checked dilation and, shocked, said I was at 10 centimeters, fully effaced and ready to push. And she couldn't find any heart tones of the baby. I was melting into the warm water, finally relaxing. Her voice urgent, she said we had to get our baby out immediately, meaning I had to push immediately. No time to get out of the pool. Childbirth is designed to be a long process to give the mother's body time to adjust and the baby's head time to compress and decompress properly. The mother's emotions run parallel, each stage of labor corresponding to a clear emotional state. I'd gone from 5 to 10 centimeters in 15 minutes and was not ready to push, even to save my baby's life. I wanted to go to sleep. The midwife, her just-arrived assistant, my mom, and Jack each grabbed one of my limbs and loudly called forth my courage, rousing me to push. I pushed 4 or 5 times and Leo's head appeared. We were all so excited and relieved when he came all the way out. That lasted only a moment. I can still see his long, too thin body flopping in front of me, umbilical cord still connected, backlit with the kitchen light. He was ash gray and not breathing. "Oh, Janae," my mother said, "Oh, dear Lord," in instant prayer. Leo's cord was wrapped around his neck 4 times with a tightened, true knot in the middle. The midwife unwrapped the cord and began mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She'd not even had time to bring in all her gear. Leo started breathing after a couple of her breaths and revived well. His APGAR score went to an 8 with no worrisome signs. He was 20 inches long and only 5 pounds, the skin on his arms and legs hanging in folds, as though he had gained weight in utero and then drew on it to survive after the cord knotted. But he nursed well as we watched him closely. Then he seemed to lose color. We gave him oxygen, a common need for newborns in this high altitude of over 6,000 feet, and his color returned. But because we weren't sure of the cause of his oxygen need, it could have been many things because of the possible in utero trauma, we sought the advice of our pediatrician and a pediatric nurse. They weren't sure what to do either, so we finally decided to take him to the hospital to make sure there wasn't something wrong that we couldn't see. The hospital eventually discovered that Leo had too little fat on his body to sustain his blood sugar between feedings. Hooked him up to an IV in the neonatal intensive care unit, and there we were. I got no post-labor rest. Our first week revolved around a 3-hour schedule of breastfeeding, then formula feeding, checking blood sugar, and trying to sleep. Every time they poked his heel, my world was in danger of ending, fearing he would never get better. After a week, he had gained enough weight to stabilize his blood sugar, and we brought him home. It took a few months for his arms and legs to plump up, and now he's fierce, snarky, and developing normally. He was 1 when I wrote, this is parentheses, He was 1 when I wrote that. He's 10 now, healthy, still fierce and snarky, but also kind, smart, and determined. And for this, I can report that today, just a few hours ago, I'm totally going to cry. He came into the room, and after measuring himself, and he was like, "How tall are you, Mama?" And I said, "I'm 5'4", and he was like, "I'm 5'4" too. So today, he's as tall as me. He's almost 13. After coming through the birth, I disdained myself for still present panic, even more than before. I made it through that week. I did what I had to do to keep Leo alive. I was strong. But my panic trigger had always been a fear of death, of my death. It shamed me that Leo's almost death didn't cure my fear. Profound as it was, I still panicked with ever-present questions. When will it be? Will I go before Jack? How will I handle it? How will I handle growing old? I didn't want to live the rest of my life being afraid. I was in danger of missing real life, real, beautiful, fragile, joyful, everyday life. My infant son faced down death in my womb. What would it take for me to face it? Owen's take. Owen worked at our local grocery store. As he rang up my food, he asked, "So, what book can you recommend?" I was writing a check and distractedly said, "Let's just stop here." I was writing a check. That tells you how long this was ago, 2007. So, let's all laugh together about writing checks. Okay. All right. So Owen asked, "So what book can you recommend?" I was writing a check and distractedly said, "Well, I've been reading The Alphabet versus the Goddess, a study of the effects of literacy on catalyzing a paternalistic shift in societies. Really fascinating, actually." "Oh, yeah?" I heard him say. "Yeah," I said, still looking down, writing. "Well, and then there's my favorite book, Dune." I said this as if to say, I know you won't know what I'm talking about, or that it was a book before it was a movie. I am still such a nerd. Excuse me. I don't know why, this whole thing, it's like everything coming up and it makes me burp. Anyway, I am such a nerd. And then I heard, "Face your fears or they will crawl over your back." Oh my goodness. My head snapped up to see 2 light blue eyes under short brown hair, 2 full lips smiling, almost ironically. I said, "Most people think that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But we of the Bene Gesserit," and I smiled, raising my eyebrows as his eyes and smile widened at my quotes, "we have seen that power attracts the corruptible." A paraphrase, but still one of my favorite quotes. I forgot to finish writing the check. "I read it all the time," I said. "Me too," he said. "Frank Herbert was a genius." "Right?" I said. "I'm Owen," he said, extending his hand over groceries. "Janae," I said, shaking his hand. "See you around," he said. "Yeah," I said, "this is where I shop." That was in February. Almost every time I bought groceries, Owen and I chatted. I emailed him information about Pikes Peak Writers workshops, and he came to one. He quit working at the market and got a job working nights, but we still emailed every now and then, usually on a philosophical question, writing, or music. After I started planning the project, we got coffee a few times so I could pick his brain. He said he'd done everything on the list except for belly dancing. I was astonished. How? "I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and moved toward the chaos," he said. When I asked what he thought of my smoking, When I asked what he thought of my smoking a cigarette, he said, "Smoking fills chunks of need." I was surprised to hear he had smoked for 2 whole years. He was a vegan and seemed supremely healthy. At first, he said, he smoked once a month with one group of friends during poker. Then it was once a week. then every day. When he needed to pep up, it did the job. When he needed to relax, it did the job. It filled social niches too, pockets of awkward time. I thought of how much less geeky I would look if, when nervous, I lit up a cigarette instead of scratching my knee. When he decided to quit, he had to replace cigarettes in those needs, discovering they all had different parameters, making quitting complex. Journal. I no longer think anything on the oat list is inherently bad. I look at it and think, no big deal. These things are trivial compared to love, childbirth, doing good deeds. Where is this list's power? Maybe it resides in the pouncing quality of my fear as I approach each task. I couldn't admit it to myself when first discussing it with friends, but I knew I'd want to chicken out. That's why I made it a project. Work. If it's work, I will do it. Face fear. So even though smoking a cigarette surely hasn't changed my life, I had to do it. Journal. I'm hitting a wall. I choked on lentils and rice. I'm forcing myself to do this list. It's going to suck, and I'm going to look stupid and fail. I have nothing to say. Does Jack really not care about what I do? Why is he so blasé about this? But he is happiest at home, taking up my slack. My friends and acquaintances give me credit for being a dynamo. I've never seen myself that way, but something changed 6 months after Leo was born. Suddenly, I was able to walk a few mornings a week, even with little sleep. Ideas gushed, me amplified, and now this project. Crazy. Things I have learned about myself so far. I am self-disciplined. I am sharp-minded. I am not afraid to face things, mostly. Less than I thought. Not sure. I can handle deep panic without going insane, I think. I get things done. Journal. I was taught that clean living is the fountain of youth, and I do look far younger than my 37 years. But what is its source? Good genes? My mom looks at least 15 years younger than her age. But what if vice yields aging? What on the list could do that? Will I look older after doing these 24 things? Shit. Journal. I know this is a harebrained idea, that making it a project is not how most people sowed their oats, without thinking through the consequences. I'm building as much risk into this as possible, but the reality is that I have 3 children and a husband. My goal is not to wreak havoc, loosely playing with my family's lives. It is to learn, explore, and experience. Most of my friends are older and parents, with perspectives far from my freewheeling, risk-taking younger friends. And though all have helped, so far, I've had to research and plan on my own, because impulse doesn't work for my life, both because of my lack of knowledge and our limited resources of money and time. Very different from the general idea of, quote, sowing your wild oats. And that is the end of chapter 2. The next chapter, 3, for tomorrow night is Eyes Opened Wide. And I will tell you that I'm going to be really embarrassed and blushing probably most of the time, but because it's about reading literary erotica for the first time. So there's that. And I'm probably going to have to look up on YouTube to make sure that it's okay to read it out loud on YouTube. Crap, I didn't think about that part. But that's chapter 3. I just finished about smoking a cigarette, and just thank you. I'm seeing so many names of people that, because of the Facebook algorithms, I don't really get to interact a whole lot with here, and I really appreciate your being here. I need to tell you, I meant to say this at the beginning, but this is a really intense process. It's strange to be doing this without being afraid of what you think of me. There's a little bit of that. I mean, everybody has that. But I mean, as you'll hear me read, I used to be very bound and chained by fear of what other people thought of me. And that is mostly gone. It's weird. I'm like nervous and excited to be doing this. I'm doing it for me, but if any of you get any like inspiration or courage, I've had several of you tell me that out of my fumbling, crazy journey. I love that. I hope that's the case. Someone asked me about the Church of Wild, and I'd like to answer that at the end of this. Throughout 2007, when I was doing the project, and then afterwards when I was writing about it, people would say, hey, you're doing wild things? Cool. And you're a preacher's daughter. You should start a church, and you could call it the Church of Wild. Right? And I laughed because I'm not starting a church. Whatever. And just about 6 months ago, I was talking with a friend about writing the Oat Project workbook, which an agent has asked me for a long time ago. We'll see if they still take it. But I just haven't felt right about doing that. And after 2 years of therapy, which is why this is a crazy feeling, I haven't put myself out in public with you guys. I've barely gone to anything. I've just been kind of really focusing on healing and just becoming really solid in myself finally. But I feel ready to do the workbook. And so I mentioned it to somebody, and she was like, the Church of Wild, that's it, you know? So what I'm going to be doing, and this is like solid, this is not gel-like, I'm using sort of the concept of how do we integrate the wild into our everyday lives, along with what's become my core belief, really, and that is what I call LIWI, Liwi, life is worth itself. And I'm going to use the things that are in this book to craft a workbook that is kind of like a catechism. I'm going to be really irreverent and use any and all religious structures and paradigms and terms to explore how we integrate the wild into our everyday lives, and how life is worth itself changes how we do that. And so I am working on that workbook right now. And that's the writing that I'm doing besides this fiction, which I'll talk about some other time. You'll see eventually. It's sci-fi. But that's what the Church of Wild is. And that's what the YouTube channel is going to really focus in on after I'm done with this, like reading the book out loud. Doing this it feels like an ending and a beginning. It's kind of the bridge because it's what the Church of Wild is sort of based on. But I'm also going beyond that because it's strange. I'm not the scared person that I was in this book. It's weird seeing how the things that I'm still like a nerd. But yeah, that's what the Church of Wild is, and you can look forward, hopefully, to edited and sort of video essays, and stuff is going to be on my website and all that kind of stuff. But that's down the line. So thank you for hanging with me, and I will see you tomorrow at 7:30. And that's all. Please ask any questions either on the event page or in these comments. I will eventually get to a Q&A and a hangout and all that kind of thing. Okay? Love you guys. Bye.